Without further ado, welcome to our panel, Women on the Rise in Venture Capital. And we've got Veronica, Morgan, Daisy, Carolina, and myself. I'll be moderating today. This panel is brought to you by Black VC and VCFamilia. So if you're not aware, Black VC is a nonprofit organization committed to transforming the venture capital industry to mirror the diverse demographics of the US. Black VC is empowering and supporting Black investors through educational programs, community events, and mentorship. And they are partnering with VCFamilia. VCFamilia is reshaping the venture capitalist and founder narrative. We're normalizing the Latinx experience, cultures, and community in the venture ecosystem. Mission is to create an open and inclusive environment for future and current Latinx investors to thrive. VCFamilia brings Latinx cultures into the venture community and, of course, increase representation in investment roles. And I would be remiss if I didn't say, La unión hace la fuerza. Before we start, I also want to say, I'm sure plenty of people are feeling a bit put out by recent events, specifically in Atlanta, Georgia. And, you know, any kind of racism is always ends in violence. So, you know, I just want to acknowledge that if people have been feeling not quite fully themselves in the past few days, there's a reason for it. And hopefully you have people to reach out to and to speak to, and if not, can drop, I'm sure any of us a line, because we don't live in a VC bubble. We live in the world, and what happened in Atlanta was it's not all right. So all of that being said, let's dive in and learn about everybody's experiences. So I am going to call on our participants to introduce themselves, your name, where you work, brief professional and personal background. And let's start with Carolina.
Hi, everyone. So I'm Carolina Rojas. I am originally from Miami, Florida. I'm currently in New York City working at NFP Ventures. We're an early stage venture firm focused on fintech, insurtech, and digital health. And I'm really happy to be here.
Fantastic. Welcome, Carolina. Let's go with Daisy.
Hi, everyone. Happy to be here. I'm an investor with JetBlue Technology Ventures. We're the venture arm of JetBlue Airways, and we typically invest at the Series A or seed stages in travel, technology, and hospitality companies. I personally focus on sustainability. It's what I'm really passionate about, how to reduce travel's carbon footprint and look at other areas like the future of work and how it correlates to the future of travel. I'm passionate about travel because travel really helps people develop their worldly perspectives and just really hone in on appreciating everyone's differences, which right now is incredibly important. My family hails from Central America, Guatemala and El Salvador, but I'm originally from Los Angeles, and I'm just excited to be here with everyone else on the stage.
Awesome. Bienvenida, Daisy. Okay, I guess I'm going alphabetically. So Morgan, you're up next.
Great. Hi, everyone. I'm Morgan. It's a pleasure to be here. Daisy, also great background. We had not met, so it's good to learn more about everyone here today. So in terms of my background, I come from really everywhere. I was born in Japan, did high school in Germany, moved a bunch of places in between, ended up out here in the Bay Area, and I work at In-Q-Tel, which is the strategic investment arm of the intelligence community. So basically our LPs or our limited partners are the three-letter agencies or CIA, NSA, FBI, etc. So it's a really interesting fund. It's been a great place for me to start my career. I've been at In-Q-Tel for the last few years, and I'm mostly focused on any technologies in AI/ML, infrastructure, and cybersecurity. Thanks.
Outstanding. Morgan has the highest security clearance of anybody in the room right now. Veronica, you're next.
Great. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here and excited to share experiences and answer your questions. and excited for this beautiful panel. Always great when we can cross collaborate and have beautiful, diverse women to hear from. Like many of you, I've been in your seats before. So I recently joined Mavron towards the end of last year in October. And Mavron is an early stage consumer VC fund. We invest in early stage, which typically for us falls in line with seed and Series A rounds of companies and founders who are building brands, products, and services that meaningfully integrate into the life of the consumer. We are sector and industry agnostic, so I literally look at everything all day, every day. What gets me excited and why I pursued venture capital is really to help create spaces like this, make the ecosystem more equitable. I'm originally from Tacoma, Washington, which is about 40 minutes south of Seattle, so grew up in the Seattle area. And my mom, when I was a kid, started her own 24-hour daycare. So I got to see a mompreneur. I got to see a Black woman start her own business and see how important that is as a vehicle for economic mobility for communities of color. So that's where my passion really stems from, and super excited to hear what questions you guys might have.
Outstanding. Thank you so much. I myself am Flavia Fuente, based in Austin, Texas. I grew up in Southern California, moved to Texas about 10 years ago, actually to work as a community organizer, working on climate justice. It was a long, winding path, but I have landed as a growth investor, B2B SaaS. My wonderful employer is called BuildGroup, and if you're in Austin, Texas, you should give me a shout. All right, let's get right into it. So it's Women's History Month. You know, we deserve more than the month, but I guess this month we're going to talk especially about us and how wonderful we are. But why don't we talk about your experiences in venture capital as a woman? What are some highlights, biggest challenges? And maybe it's less about being a woman, more about being a person of color. The floor is yours, but I do feel a little bit like I need to pick on someone. So I might go backwards this time. Veronica?
Yeah, great question. I think about this a lot, given that I have a passion for making the ecosystem more equitable for people of color. And I'm also a woman, so I sit at that intersection. And I think because we all sit at that intersection, or not we all, depending on who is in the audience, allies could be there, and we thank y'all too. But we sense and we see things differently, and we have a higher sense of EQ, I would say. I think in terms of highlights of being a woman of color in venture is automatically I have a differentiated perspective, and I'm able to provide that perspective, right? I think in this point in my career and prior to coming into venture, I was in strategy consulting, which is also a very kind of white, opaque space. But for the first time in my career, that differentiated perspective is super valued. And so I get to lean into my Blackness. I get to lean into the fact that I'm a woman. I get to lean into the fact that I'm not wealthy. I don't come from a wealthy background. So let me provide that perspective to you, people who may not come from that background and may not have anyone in your network who come from that background. I think especially from a consumer perspective, the consumer in America is varied. We're all different colors, we're all different ethnicities, we're immigrants, we come from all different backgrounds. And so being able to provide a differentiated perspective has been really valued, and something that I personally have just had to learn how to accept in terms of my Blackness, my womanhood is valued at my firm. I think, another highlight and something I looked for, and for those of you who are doing your searches for roles, my wish list, one of the things I really wanted in a role was at a fund, particularly, are there any women at the fund? That was really important to me because we as women have unique, things that we face. Parenthood, right? What if we want to become parents? What does that look like? Is there anyone on the team who either has kids or is a woman and could understand that? So I think that's been a highlight for me. I have 2 women on my team who are investors, one who's a general partner and one who is a principal. And I just feel like that's almost unheard of in the VC space. So I feel really lucky to have that. In terms of challenges, it's interesting. I see challenges that I'm still surprised that entrepreneurs are facing. So when I talk to and hear pitches from founders who are women or women of color, they still say to me, it's challenging. I'm building this menopause business and other investors don't really get it. And so that's a little frustrating to hear that those kinds of things are still happening after all this dialogue, after everything we've seen in the press. But from a highlight perspective, it gives me a chance to say, well, I understand, I believe in what you're building. But then I will say and bring up imposter syndrome. I don't think I fully understood what that meant until I came into the venture space, because it's real. I would say, grab your sisters in arms and chat about it and have your kind of crew, because that has been a saving grace for me. I think coming into this space, which is highly competitive, it moves super fast, it's really hard work. And being new to it, I'm like, do I even know what I'm doing? I'm learning, blah, 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 all this stuff has been a transition to get comfortable with not being perfect. And I think I'll speak for myself, but as a woman of color, that attempt to have perfection has been something that I've tried to pursue. And so I have to get comfortable with the fact that I am learning. So yeah, I'll stop there.
That's great.
Amazing.
Sorry.
I was just going to jump in. I was like, oh, reverse alphabetical. But if you want to make any commentary, I was just ready with my comments. Go for it.
I was actually going to ask you to go next because, Veronica is in the kind of world of consumer where it's kind of a very clear line between, if you're selling to America and you don't have representation from a significant portion of buyers, you're going to miss stuff. So to go take it to your world, Morgan, which is totally different and maybe less about that, please.
Yeah, so I'll jump in. I'm, to Veronica, so impressed by people that do consumer investing. It is just such a black box to me. So very impressed by you having that skill set. And what you said about your mom resonated with me. Just seeing your mom succeeding, seeing your mom build her own business. I felt like I also had that empowering example growing up. So my mom is the CIO of the Marine Corps, which is just, her security clearance is way better than mine, to your earlier point. But so I was able to see her growing from immigrating from Jamaica in her teens to being enlisted in the Marine Corps, pursuing education, and then just working her way up the ranks, which was an incredible example to just have built into my life as a parent. And my dad was so nurturing and the best pair of parents I could have asked for. So I feel like coming into venture, kind of what I was also looking for and seeking out were also those examples of empowering people that I could be inspired by, learn from, and just talk to as I navigated this nebulous industry. Because for me, I was coming from a background where, my parents didn't know what venture capital was. And today, even my mom called me and was like, have you heard of A16Z? I'm like, yes, this is a really big firm in venture capital. And so it's been an awesome learning experience for me. But the thing I want to highlight is there are women that are just helping other women at this point rise up the ranks. When I joined venture 3 years ago, I felt like there was a ton of momentum, and this momentum has just accelerated around empowering women and minorities to really get into venture and be fundamentally exposed to opportunities in venture. Because if I were to talk about one challenge that I have or that I've seen people face, it's just a fundamental exposure problem. I went to school in the Bay Area, yet didn't learn about venture in school. I learned about venture through an internship that I had. So I feel like when people don't know the opportunity to join this ecosystem exists, then it's just a little bit of a disconnect. So that was a challenge that I faced. On the positive side, as mentioned, I feel like I've just used the last 3 years to just really join tight-knit communities, in particular in Black VC, where I run the communications team and get to work with all of these amazing friends, colleagues. They're awesome. And then other organizations like All Raise and EVCA have been instrumental in me just learning more, because everyone gives me a little bit of their time and I get up to speed on how to assess this deal or how to act in this situation. So the community, I would say, has been the biggest positive for me.
Excellent. Please go for it, Daisy.
Yeah, I absolutely echo what Morgan was saying around community. For me, that's really been the highlight of being in VC, because when I joined, I started my VC journey with the micro VC in Sweden, where I was living for 2.5 years. And there, the perspective that I was really bringing in was that of a woman being the only woman on the team, and also that of an American and Latinx. Now in my current team, I feel very supported because it's frankly quite diverse, and a lot of my mentors do stem from my team. And we discuss everything from imposter syndrome, like what Veronica was talking about, and ways to get over this and really become unapologetic about your weaknesses. And if you know you have weaknesses, highlighting those and working on them on a gradual basis. And another area, apart from working with my team on these aspects, are also leaning in with communities like VCFamilia, Women in VC, EVCA. There's so many amazing communities like Venture Forward, the NVCA's nonprofit as well, that do so many amazing brand building, just like different brand building initiatives around how to communicate better and how to build your investment thesis as well. So that's really it for me, the community. And when it comes to the challenges, again, it's, as I said, really owning and feeling like you belong and being unapologetic about it.
Awesome. Yeah. Carolina.
Yeah, so all amazing comments. I'm gonna circle back because I gave a really short and sweet intro, but just some context to why I'm so passionate about venture and why I got into it. It stemmed from my family, similar to a lot of you guys. So my family, Cuban immigrants, my grandfather was a political prisoner for 15 years in Cuba. They came to the US, and my grandmother, the first thing she did to bring all my family from Cuba was start her own business. She started her own hair salon, which is where I was born and raised in, just always serving everyone Cuban coffee and walking around talking to the customers. And, you know, as I grew up, went to school, and I learned about an industry where you can invest in other people and invest in entrepreneurs and make their dreams come true. That was to me like, you know, sign me up right away. Like that sounds incredible. And I think that's where a lot of my passion in the industry stemmed from. But I'd say with being a woman in the industry, you know, where I'm at today, I'm super blessed to have an incredible group around me. And all my coworkers are super supportive and, you know, really build me up and really champion me as an individual investor. But I'd say the biggest hill that I've had to overcome was just really like my own confidence. I think there is still a huge confidence gap with women in the industry. And, you know, I think like forming your own convictions and being able to say definitively, yes, like this is something I want to invest in. This is something I want to do. I find myself still having a hard time building those muscles. And even if it's on a call, when I have an important question to ask or something to bring up, you know, I find myself, you know, being in a situation where one of my coworkers would ask the question or bring something up, and I'm like, darn it, I totally should have asked that. I was thinking about that. So I think like one of the biggest things in the industry, you know, is really building up that confidence, building up that muscle when you're in spaces where you might be the only woman, right? And you might have a different perspective, but, you know, having the confidence to just be able to speak your mind and have a strong conviction, that I think is just one of the biggest things with being a woman in this space that's, you know, difficult, but definitely a huge area of opportunity.
Thanks, Catalina. I think that's really interesting because, you know, in really early stage venture, pre-seed, seed, frequently, and I'm no pre-seed or seed, but my understanding is it's a lot about the idea and the team. Whereas later stage where I sit, kind of, you can go to the data, right? And say like, you're going to argue with these numbers, or are we going to like make a deal here? So I almost think that like the confidence gap, it's a little easier to close later stage when you can lean on the data. Earlier, it seems like it's much harder because it's just ideas and people and teams. I don't know if any of you want to react to that and how you've kind of navigated those moments where somebody was like, I don't understand this idea, maybe because it's not part of their world, but you leaned in.
I do spend a lot of my time at the earlier stages just because I enjoy company building and like nebulous questions of market size and things like this. But when it comes down to justifying, should we make this investment to the partnership or to the more senior individuals, you have to very much have significant conviction on why this company, why now. And for me, I've found it really challenging, and especially in some of these incredibly crowded technology spaces where there are 12 companies with the same marketing language, and it's just really tough to cut through the noise, particularly for me in enterprise software where a lot of the products are really technical. So, I mean, obviously my bias is towards learning everything I possibly can about these spaces, but sometimes I flip the challenge on its head and just say, you know what, I'm gonna pursue companies that are in spaces that no one else is touching, that maybe are undervalued, and I just search for companies that maybe don't have competitors or are thinking about something in a completely different way and have 3 incumbents as competitors, but no startups as competitors. So that's justifying those sorts of companies has been a lot easier for me than justifying more competitive companies in more competitive spaces, which is part of how I help myself like build confidence and build conviction in this nebulous space of early stage investing.
I love that. You're contrarian. That's awesome. Also known as finding alpha. Okay, so let's get a little granular here. There's a lot of attendees who are interested in potentially joining this world. And I'm going to ask kind of a data-driven question. So, you know, those surveys that fly around about people in VC, I see a lot of Harvard attendees, Stanford alumni. You know, the data speaks for itself. A lot of people who've done a couple of years of investment banking. So, you know, there's a lot of how to break into VC panels, and a lot of it is like, be scrappy, do this, do the other, like domain expertise is the quickest way to just try and get into one of these top tier institutions, some of which some of you have attended. If you can't go in that way, do you need domain expertise? Do you want to come from an operator side? There's many ways to skin this cat, but you know, as granular as you can be with your advice today, which perhaps has changed from the advice you might have given a year ago, I think the attendees would love to hear it. Let's see, Veronica.
Yeah, happy to jump in on this. And so just for background context, I did go get my MBA. I went to Kellogg. They have a 1-year full-time program. And so for me, that cut out a full year of MBA that I didn't want to spend time doing. But my number one piece of advice really for folks who are interested in VC, well, actually I have 2 pieces of advice. One I heard from someone else, and one I kind of realized as I was going through this process of pursuing it as a career. But the one piece of advice that someone gave me was, everyone you talk to is going to tell you something different in terms of what you should do to break into VC. And this person's advice was, if you feel in your gut that you want to go into venture, just pursue it. If you feel in your gut you're not sure yet, you want to try something else, then do that. But if you really want to get into venture, you feel super motivated, you don't want to take no for an answer, then just pursue it. And I really took that to heart, because I was having these conversations and people were saying, go work at a startup that's, you know, got venture backed and all of this stuff, or go do this, go do that. So anyway, I did go get my MBA because I felt like, as a woman of color, finding ways to earn credibility was important. And I think the stat is like 40% of VCs went to either Stanford or Harvard. So even going from Kellogg into VC was a bit of a stretch, a bit of a pivot for me, because it was outside of that San Francisco ecosystem. And so the second piece of advice, and this is what really helped me to break in, was getting internship experience in VC. And if you are pursuing VC today, try to go to these organizations. If you can't go get your MBA, look, it's a lot of money, it's time, I get it. Not everybody's down for that, and I completely understand. But I feel like today, even more so than a year ago, there are so many programs out there now targeted at helping diverse people gain VC experience, whether that's an internship, whether that's a scout program, all these different things that exist. And I'm sure we could pull together some resources that we could share kind of after the call or whatnot, but try to leverage those, because what has been super helpful in me at least landing a first round interview was having the last thing on my resume be a VC internship or something to do with VC, because it's the chicken and the egg. Everyone says they want to give people, they want diverse people with different backgrounds in VC, but then they don't want to give you the opportunity if you don't have any VC experience. So then where do you start? And that can be super frustrating. Yeah.
All right. Got to crack through somehow. Daisy, what do you think? What's your current working advice for breaking into VC?
So I'll also just share some context of my own. I pursued a master in international business and management at the Stockholm School of Economics. This was actually a fully funded offer. And the reason that I went abroad was because school is also just so much cheaper compared to the US. And I chose Stockholm because it's one of the more nascent markets, at least compared to the Bay Area. When it comes to startups, like you have a lot of money that's flowing into the system now from companies like Spotify, King, Mojang, Klarna. And so some of my advice is also to look at those emerging cities where you have emerging fund managers, because the way I broke in was literally through networking. I networked so much with alumni at my school, always expressed interest within working with startups, VCs. I also had experience interning with startups like, at the time it was a scale up called Jumia Group in Africa, which is one of the only, it's actually the only unicorn in Africa. And so I was always trying to hone in on a different perspective that I could bring in. And I met this emerging fund manager in Sweden who was raising a new fund and really needed help on the platform side of things. So not on the investment team, but operations, events, etc. And that's really how I made my way in. And when I was moving back to the US, I thought I did have a quantitative background from studying applied mathematics at Berkeley, and really just honed in on crafting the quantitative, the qualitative skills that I had, and translating that into my CV and honing that experience when applying to the current role that I'm in right now. So I would say be really mindful about the networking that you do and the connections that you make, because a lot of what I do today is take calls with people that want to break into VC and give advice, and just go all in, like subscribe to the newsletters. There is a lot of noise out there, but if it's something you're really passionate about, study your heart out and you'll get in.
All right. Thanks, Daisy. Carolina?
Yeah, I'd say the way I got into venture was by failing a lot. I interviewed a ton. I got a whole bunch of no's, kept getting no, kept going, kept refining my pitch. And, you know, every time I refined it, made it a little bit step further. Okay, so second round now. Oh, final round now. So I think one of the biggest things in venture in general is just being someone that's really passionate. You really have to be passionate about this industry because it's a full-time job. Venture is not just like 9 to 5. Venture, it's also, you know, meeting up, catching up over drinks and listening to the deal flow, and then, you know, forming relationships with your coworkers. It's, you know, stalking people on LinkedIn, trying to find like the next best idea. It's like a constant job. And if you don't love it, it's really tough, because the only way for you to really be successful, and this is my opinion, is, you know, to be all in. And so I'd say extrapolating that with, you know, how you break into venture, it's just you have to showcase that grit and that you want it. You really just have to keep going, because at the end of the day, I think this is the best job in the world. And clearly a lot of other people do too, because a lot of people want to get in this space. But you just have to think that's you're competing with so many candidates. You have to showcase, what's your story? Who are you and what's your background? Because if there's any industry that champions individual success and an individual identity, it's this industry, right? Because you can have such a big diversity of thought, diversity of people, and that's what brings you to the best ideas and to the best startups. And so I think just honing into that during the interview process and really sharing your story, why you love the industry, why you love investing, why you love startups, and also just like refining the technical skills, right? Like learning, getting up to speed with all the startups that are in the space, getting up to speed with the technicals in venture, so that, day one, you can hit the ground running and you can be really thoughtful and smart throughout the interview process. And even when you're connecting with others about job opportunities. So I'd say just, show your passion and show your individuality.
So one of the questions is, do you need an MBA to break into VC? I can pretty confidently say, no, you don't need an MBA. I know I have one. Daisy has a master's. Veronica has an MBA. Carolina and Morgan, I believe, did not go that route. So here on the panel, 50-50. And you should know, in the industry, not everybody's very excited about hiring MBAs. Actually, there's a lot of pre-MBA only applications. So don't let that be something that dissuades you. So to kind of build off of this conversation, just so we get continue to be a little granular, skills to highlight when you're applying for VC roles. And it was Daisy who mentioned platform earlier. So there's a lot going on within the industry, right? Like there's the check writing, but there's the other dimensions of venture capital. And there's a few core functions. There's raising the money, there's deploying the money, and making the money work. And that's usually the operations platform. So, there's various skills going on here is what I've kind of perceived. A place like In-Q-Tel, they've got the money raised. So they're looking really for the other functions. But, the question here to the panel is, what are, if you pick a skill that you felt you really highlighted when you applied for VC roles, what was that skill for you? What were you like, this is my superpower? And let's go Morgan.
Okay, I'm going to take this question, but also incorporate elements of the previous question. So to your point, I didn't do an MBA, but I did do 2 degrees in engineering, so undergrad and master's. And I felt like I told my unique story partially through that. It was mostly through my internships, though. That's really how I discovered VC. And like the point that someone made on hustle and grit and like showing you really want it, I think is so true. Like I was on LinkedIn constantly, just like messaging people to get my internship. So the internship I worked at the NFL, it was just like, I cold applied, and like 4 months later, they were like, hey, like, do you want to work here? So like various places, but I was just like trying everything. In terms of skills to highlight, so something that's been important for me is just deep involvement and connectivity in the industry in general. And in terms of people wanting to break in, so Black VC, I'm just deeply familiar with Black VC, so I can highlight some of our programs. We run a Breaking Into Venture program, Black Venture Institute. These are 2 different programs designed for people at different places in their careers to get into venture. There are also more technical classes you can take. So I've taken the NVCA, I think it's called Venture Forward course, and that one is like, it costs some money. So Brad Feld offers a really similar course, and that one's free. So that's a good option for people wanting to build their quantitative and technical skills. And then in terms of breaking in, for me, I always thought it, like, good advice someone gave once was do the job before you have it. So finding ways to try venture out. So if it's an internship or sourcing deals and sending them to a firm you're interested in working in, or writing has become particularly powerful during COVID, especially when we can't be in person and build relationships that way anymore. I think all of these things display drive. And then lastly, kind of on the networking point, a few things. So one, I think it's actually, I've just started like an Airtable as like a personal CRM. So I can remember like what people invest in, what stages they are at, because otherwise I just lose the context for the conversations I had 2 years ago. So that's helpful for people wanting to break in, like, especially if you're sending people deals. So in terms of particular skills, the networking skill is a good one to have just because it'll help you later on as a board member and things like that. And the technical skills that you might get from these courses, also super helpful.
Well said. Thank you. Anybody else like to highlight what was your special skill or aptitude that you leaned in on when you interviewed?
Yeah. For me, it was adaptability. I literally wrote about this in the cover letter, and it was about my ability to communicate and to work with a diverse set of peers from my master program. It was a really diverse group from all over Europe, all over Asia, all over the US, and a few other nations as well. And so I highlighted this ability, my ability to really connect with other people from different backgrounds. And I honestly think that in today's environment, this is one of the skills that you require, because a lot of the job is taking calls with founders, and there are so many different types of founders today. Also connecting with other investors that you potentially want to co-invest with or source deals from. So for me, I would say it's really being adaptable to any situation.
That's well said, Daisy. And it's funny, before this panel started, we were trying to see if there were any Gen Zers among us. We're all millennials. And I think the aptitude for being on the phone or even liking phone calls is already kind of trending downward the younger and younger you get. So if you really want to differentiate yourself and stand out, be good on the phone, be comfortable on the phone. Veronica, please, you're skilled.
Yeah, to echo that, I would say, and I think to your point, Morgan, around hustling and networking, is now you have all of these different Slacks you can join too, like Gen Z VC. Anyone can join that. You don't need a VC email to join, and like ping people. You will be so surprised. I try to answer as much as I can, and I try to meet with people because I know how hard it is, and I want to pay that forward. So, don't be afraid to just cold reach out to folks in whatever medium you can find them in. In terms of skills, I think I also have to just echo what Daisy said. I think she said it really well. For me, it really was, I'm really great at building relationships. And that's something that, I have a high emotional quotient, like grew up, I think, again, at this point of intersectionality, where we all come from on the panel, that just gives us a superpower in really being able to connect with people and build those relationships. And then the other thing I would say too is when you're thinking about your skill set, what you have, what may be a gap, also consider where you want to go in VC. So for me, I knew that I was more interested in early stage. I had volunteered. This is another thing you could do, another hack, is go volunteer at the local accelerators in your city. Go work with entrepreneurs, right? You'll start getting, you'll start understanding your ecosystem and your local community. You'll have stories to tell in your interviews that, like, hey, founders like me. So you might want to, think about that, but also it can help you just kind of start building that muscle a little bit. And so I started doing that before I decided to go back to school. And so, I would, in addition to talk about my ability to kind of build relationships, I would think through, okay, I've worked with founders at early stage accelerators. This really excites me. You're working on a problem. It's not clear yet if what your idea is or your business is going to work. And I knew that I was not as excited about later stage venture. right? And so what I've learned is later stage, you've got a lot more data. So I'm thinking more like Series B and beyond. You've got a lot more data to crunch. So like you really do need to know how to, depending on the role, but generally you need to be good at numbers. You need to be able to build financial models and be able to do that really quickly as you think about later stage. And I don't really, I'm in a finance career, but like I don't like dealing with numbers. So I was like, early stage is perfect for me. That's where my passion lies anyway. So it just worked well from that perspective. So I would think about where the skill gaps are in relation to where you want to invest stage-wise. And then in addition, I also just highlighted my passion for consumer. You know, my mom built a consumer business. That's just where my interest is. That's what I did in consulting. I focused on consumer experience, mapping out that customer journey. So I would also highlight that as I was interviewing, especially with Mavron, which is a consumer-only VC fund. So yeah, I'll pause there.
Awesome. Carolina.
Yeah, just to add to that, I totally agree, Veronica, with your point on looking at the stages, right? Because it's so, you know, different in terms of like the quant skills and what you need from growth to early stage. But I'd say one of the biggest things with, I think Morgan, you mentioned this, was writing. I didn't realize going into the industry how important writing is, which, you know, I guess, you know, in a lot of ways, writing, that's how you convey your thoughts. That's how you convey your convictions. But for one reason or another, I just didn't realize just the amount of writing that you do on the job. So there's just that one thing to highlight. There is a lot of writing. And, you know, there's a lot of people that blog and, you know, do social media posts and that sort of thing. But I think that was one of the skills that I definitely honed into as I was interviewing. And, you know, kind of vision is 2020 looking back, like I now realize like, oh, that was a huge point, is because that's such a big part of the role, such a big part of, you know, external facing content that you push out. And like to that point as well, because I do remember, and I forgot who mentioned, like a lot of people are going to give you different advice in the space and you kind of have to cater it to who you are as a person and what you'd like to do. I remember having a call when I was trying to break into the space, and one of the girls told me, like, I got into venture because I started this blog and it had like hundreds of thousands of followers and it was really successful. And I know myself, I'm like, I don't know if I can be a blogger. I'm not like the best social media person. So I knew that particular aspect wasn't a strength of mine, but I knew in writing in general, I was strong in that. So that's one skill that I honed into. And again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but just showing that, you know, you have grit and you're passionate. I think that's huge as well. Yeah, I'd say those two are big. And lastly, again, with communication, being able to connect with people. You know, you want to work with and invest and partner with people that you trust. And, you know, you build that trust by building genuine relationships. So I think that's a really important skill to hone into as well.
Awesome. All right. So we've got 15 minutes left. There may be some aspiring entrepreneurs or perhaps just other VCs in attendance. So we're going to kind of flip the conversation a little more to stuff you're looking for, stuff you'd like to invest in, signals you look for when evaluating companies. So I'd love to hear from everyone kind of where are you looking right now? What excites you? I know Morgan's a contrarian. I love that. So why don't we take it right back to Carolina, start us off again. What's getting you excited these days?
Yeah, so I think for me, I've kind of become the go-to fintech person on my team. I think fintech is the whole space. There's a lot of opportunity, right? We just saw Coinbase valued at like $100 billion. There's a whole bunch of activity going on in the cryptocurrency space. But But I think what's really interesting about it is insurance as almost like the fourth leg of the stool of fintech. I think there's been a whole host of different insurtech deals this last year. But I think there's still a lot of opportunity to unlock there, is with open banking, we now have, access to more granular information on individuals than we ever had. And so being to extrapolate information of, connecting tax advisors, the information that they see, financial advisors, the information that they see, and having it all in one platform where we can have more transparency and then be able to add on, insurance products to that. If we have foresight of, we know someone's going to buy a house in the next 6 months because we have all these other data points, maybe they should get some homeowners insurance. Is there a way that we can automatically tag that in? So I think that's a huge area of opportunity that a whole host of companies are trying to unlock. Even if you think about the cryptocurrency space, there's different ways of having cryptocurrency insurance. There's like hot storage, cold storage. There's so many different elements that a lot of people don't realize they're not fully insured. So that was a bit long-winded, but I think
this is a great question to set everybody off on their passions and and show what it actually looks like. That's awesome. And I just made a note. I have an insurtech I need to show you then.
Amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Carolina. All right, Daisy, your turn to rant, I think is.
So I typically invest in travel tech, hospitality tech, and that's really the focus area for JetBlue Ventures. And within that space, I'm really excited about sustainability. So anything that has to do with carbon offset programs, renewables, hydrogen, electropropulsion when it comes to aircrafts. That's what I'm really honing in my specialty in. I've been with the team for about a year now, and that's all that I talk about for the most part, and was actually on a call with this carbon offset company before joining the panel. I'm also really passionate about the future of work, especially today with a lot of us working remotely or looking at different mixes of going back into the office, whether that's 2 to 3 days in the office, a few days remote, or just going fully remote, like companies like Twitter, Spotify, I think has a mixed approach as well. So anything that's within the short-term rental space, anything that has to do with technologies that make, say, moving abroad easier, anything that has to do with helping digital nomads, and really just making the travel journey much more seamless, safe, and sustainable. That's what I really hone in on. When it comes to what we look at for an investment, we typically invest at the Series A. And what we like to say is we always look for the growth opportunities, because we know that under hard times, companies do pivot, right? The travel industry was severely impacted 2020 and is still recovering. And we had quite a few portfolio companies really just pivot. So for us, we do really care about the team. When the going gets tough, do the tough get going, right? We look at the grit, we look at the opportunity in the market for growth, and just the mindset of the team, I would say.
Yeah, I would imagine you're looking at some opportunities that are poised to take off in the second half of this year.
We're seeing a pent-up demand for travel.
Yeah,
it's up by, I think it's, so compared to 2019, just really quickly, 2020 travel was down by about 90% domestically. Right now it's down by 70%, and we anticipate it to get to 50 or 60% by the end of the year. So slowly rising.
that's going to be incredible. And it'll be, I would presume, a lot of more tourism focused travel versus the business travel, which is going to have kind of a different flavor. Anyways, awesome. All right, Morgan.
Sure. So At In-Q-Tel, we are actually stage agnostic, though. So as an investor, you can kind of pick where you focus. I end up doing most of the earlier stage stuff. So we like to look for deeply technical teams and deeply technical products. So I spend most of my time looking for that in the world of enterprise software. But something that's really piqued my interest lately is just around how communities form online. And that has led me to open source projects. And I feel like open source projects are actually like GitHub, GitLab. These are actually platforms that host communities of super engaged people that are all working towards one similar goal around building this project that they are super passionate about. So I've been looking more into the tooling around open source projects, tools that understand where people contribute from, and understand how frequent of contributors they are, just all of these things, like extra data around how people contribute. And then in that vein, you can kind of understand how people are motivated and how to make the project more interesting and expose it to more people. So I've been looking into tons of platforms around that space. It's like sounds niche now, but I feel like it will be able to broaden into something like maybe more broadly community management tools or internal tools, CRM-like tools that people can use. So I've been spending a lot of time there. Super interesting to me. Back on the Airtable point, I've been like just capturing what I call trending spaces. And like I started the Airtable recently, but I have like a bunch of different spaces that I'm just tracking and like list companies in. And whenever something comes up and I want to explore more about it, I just track it in there. So another good tip for organizing, which I've always struggled with. So.
Awesome. All right, Veronica, what's got you excited?
Yeah, so I look across industries, and just for context, I have 4 general partners on my team who I source for. And so one of the pieces of advice I've gotten in terms of actually being in the VC space is think of your partners as sort of like your clients or your customers. And so I source for them and their interest areas, and those interests overlap and align. But I think as I continue to grow in my career, then I'll have sort of my personal focus areas. But at the moment, I'm looking really in the pet space. There's been a ton of pet adoption or, the addition of pet families across the US, given all the COVID, everything we've been going through over the past year. One of the other spaces that we're super excited about is this kind of verticalization of Facebook groups. So we invested in a company like CoStar, which is this astrology app, right? There's all these Facebook groups that exist. People don't like Facebook. They want to move off the platform. So what you're seeing is these different platforms kind of emerge that can host and really cater to the specific needs of these groups. We like to say we like sneaky but big markets. So think Fragmented, tattoo parlors. There's more tattoo parlors in the US than there are Starbucks, but you would never know that, right? So unless you were thinking about that market. So in addition to that, I think digital health is something that we look at all the time, and that's a core interest area of mine and for the fund. And then we're starting to look a little bit in fintech. We really haven't done much in the fintech space, so I have to touch base with some of you ladies interested in fintech as well, because deal flow. And then another space that I'm really interested in and excited about is the menopause space. So we feel like that's a huge underserved market in the US. We as women, or we go through that naturally. And actually, if you Google menopause, Google has a definition that categorizes it as a disease. So clearly, there's some misunderstanding, and we want to make sure that that we as women are being served. So that's an underserved kind of big market that we're looking at very closely. In terms of what we look for, so we consider Series A to be our core investment stage. And what that means is we deploy most of our capital at the Series A. For us, that means check sizes anywhere from 2 to 8 million. And we kind of look for in the teens in terms of level of ownership. So what that means in terms of metrics that we look for, and I think Kimberly asked this question in the chat, but we really like to see, is there some demonstration of customer love, consumer love? You may have heard this, phrase in different ways, but a couple ways that we look for that is, what is the percentage of your growth that's organic versus paid? it's really important to us that at the seed and Series A stage, that it's at least 40% organic. Because we want to make sure that, you know, anyone can pay Facebook ads to Facebook or social ads to Facebook and Instagram, but how do you really determine, is this really meeting a market need? Another thing that we look for is, what's your repeat purchase rate? This applies to some businesses, it doesn't apply to others, but, you know, is that at least 25%? We obviously look at revenue, but given the market today, people are getting term sheets or deals with zero revenue and all of these things, but we try to stay true to what we look for, which is, you know, we like to see around, I would say anywhere from 250K a month in revenue to $1 million a month when we were looking at the Series A investment. There's a company we recently invested in, just to give you guys an idea. It's a CPG retail company, and they have a purchase like every 30 seconds or whatnot. So that was like a really staggering metric that they shared with us. Yeah, so those are what we look for. I'm also going to just drop in, because we posted this online a couple years ago, but feel free to ping me if you want, you know, more up to date, but it's pretty much accurate. But this is where we categorize the things that we look for. So take a peek.
Awesome. Thank you. I love the unbundling of Facebook and unbundling of LinkedIn themes a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And people are finding that they'd rather spend time in places that are perhaps a little more focused on them and their needs. And I love that tattoo parlor stat. That's a good one. And to Morgan, open source communities, they've been around for a little while, and they keep growing. And there's like a kind of common thread of community. Like, if you can find businesses with communities, either boosters, customers, contributors is kind of this most interesting one. That's usually a gold mine, although maybe I should say a Bitcoin mine. All right, we have 2 minutes, 1 minute left, so that's it. Thank you everybody for attending. See, we had like 76 participants. Morgan, Veronica, Carolina, Daisy, thank you all for joining. And thank you to Black VC and La Familia, VCFamilia for putting this together. We hope to see a lot of new faces on the next one, more women of color. Let's change these numbers. Thank you all very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Wonderful.